Today I'm joined by Kartik, founder of Aurera. Aurera focuses on answer engine optimization, helping teams understand how their brand and content are retrieved and represented across AI search experiences. Kartik, really glad to have you here. So I've
Same
been
here, thanks.
welcome. I was thinking about my Google usage over the last few months, and it's actually surprisingly low. A lot of my search now happens in ChatGPT, Perplexity, YouTube, or Anthropic, based on the domain that I'm interested in. Under the hood, these systems still rely on retrieving and ranking, but the experience feels very, very different. What do you think we are seeing? Is it a real change in how people are now discovering things and content? Please help us understand that.
Sure. So my thesis is, Richa, that it's a fundamental shift. It's not just like an interface level or surface level sort of UI refresh. And the reason is the layer at which cognition is happening has now changed. In erstwhile Google world or classical sort of search world, the discovery would happen post the click. That you look at, you search a query, then you get various results, and then you synthesize the output which you get. Now with LLM specifically, if we see, the synthesis is happening before the click, so there is no concept of like a referring link, referring traffic, or UTM, which you used to have in the Google, because now even though a lot of retrieval infrastructure still remains, like indexing, embedding, so on and so forth, but the unit of interaction fundamentally has now changed. Instead of sort of links and documents competing for a position, now you have basically facts, canonical facts, which are now competing for inclusion in an answer. So not per se a ranking. So that's why the whole structure and schema would feel a lot different, because it's not about just indexing results, but it's about being cited within a reasoning system, and inclusion in the answer as a citation. So that's the key difference I see.
So that's fascinating. How does the change, you see, the way brand should think about visibility or presence in this new ecosystem? So, with that said, I think for the past 20 years, right, SEO has been, as you mentioned, crawling, authority with AI answers and especially the rack systems. It feels like we are doing, or we are still doing some sort of retrieval, as you mentioned, but the goal has shifted, right, from rank my page to actually use my content, right, in the answer. What do you think actually changes here at a technical level?
See, earlier what used to happen was, I mean, still search is happening. So don't get me wrong. Search still remains at the backdrop, because any sort of recall or retrieval which you do backed with relevance of the query to the answer, with the embedded trust, that still remains. But what is now changing is models like LLMs are looking for consistent information and facts across authoritative sources. So in typical search, you would only care about the DR or the authority of the domain, and the number of backlinks. But now, technically, it's not about how many backlinks are pointing to you and what's your DR. It's about how your information is consumed and loaded in the model's reasoning graph. So now it was, earlier keywords to document matching, but now it's more like a prompt, which could be a long query. You have to decompose it, you have to do multi-hop retrieval, and then answer in a curated and assembled manner. So technically, I don't see it, and I keep having this debate with a lot of people, that is geo or generative engine optimization or just sort of old wine in new bottle? Not really, because the fundamental difference of the way you would do citation, you would do querying and retrieval changes. Although a subset of it is still the typical retrieval and sort of query decomposition like you would do in a traditional search, but the way it is consumed and assimilated is very different. And it's a mixture of your pre-trained data plus web search. So in that sense, it becomes much more exhaustive. So my feeling is that whatever you do for geo I mean, SEO would get subsumed with time within the overall effort of LLM optimization, which brands would do.
And are there any emerging tools or frameworks that can help brands to understand how their content is represented within these reasoning frameworks, reasoning graphs?
See, technically, if you see, LLMs are opaque in this, right? I mean, erstwhile Google was very open and transparent because it fits well with their monetization and ad network to be able to deliver more targeted keyword planning and those kind of resources, and they were very, very open about it. But LLMs are very opaque in terms of what signals are they tracking. The way they are tracking those signals also changes very frequently. So, for example, in our tool, in Aurora Intelligence, we run these synthetic prompt pipelines for brands on a daily basis across all the models. And we see a lot of model drift in the answers and responses. We see in the citation sources and the intelligence, lot of drifts happening week over week. So which means that there is no consistency in terms of like you would have seen in public domain and on LinkedIn people talking about that, hey, Reddit is a key contributor.
Mm,
And the weightage of Reddit to sort of attribution was as high as I think 41, 42% few months back to
mm,
as low as sub 10%. So
yeah.
the range of volatility is significant, and this changes for sectoral or cluster level queries as well. Like for certain service-led models, you would see less attribution, and for more product-related sort of attribution, you would see a lot of weightage given to certain UGC-based platforms like Reddit. So in
Mm,
that sense, there is no open framework or model available, but it's all stochastic. So like we also do evidence-based, A/B testing-based empirical analysis where we would try to run these synthetic prompts, get response, overlay a synthetic persona, and try to best mimic or mirror the actual consumption pattern because LLMs are not sharing those user level data due to privacy concerns. So that at best, what you're doing is trying to mirror the behavior of LLMs.
mm. So right, that you have talked about the drift is happening, right? Is it tied to model updates that are happening probably very frequently, or is it changing the underlying web data, or both?
So both, right? Both. I mean, underlying web data, of course, goes through a natural series of evolution, but more importantly, the model which sits on top of it, they are also changing, right? Plus, the construct of the model changes. So in terms of earlier, you would have only the LLM, but now let's say you have browsers which are powered by LLMs. So the user is hopping between a multi-turn conversation in the LLM interface, then probably doing browsing through the LLM browsers. And then, thanks to things like UCP and agentic shopping coming into play, you might have a agent mode enabled, which is doing certain tasks on your behalf. So this becomes a super complicated structure if you see that part of the interaction from discovery to research to querying is done by human slash agent, and then the transaction consummation might be done by an agent through the LLM browser. And this whole interface and the intermingle, if you see, is slightly different from what a typical search would do, right? Where you do search and then the actual transaction would happen on the publisher page or the advertiser's page. And it was much more cleaner process. But here, and it may happen that you are initiating a conversation on a certain LLM, but using a browser of some other LLM and then doing transaction on a third LLM. Because with time, thanks to MCP and universal protocols, you might be able to also make your memory interoperable. And that complicates the things because then the user is hopping between LLMs for a single or multiple transaction from discovery to completion.
Right.
And LLMs have to sort of pass on this information overlaid with memory.
So there is a lot of blurring of boundaries, right? And it also affects when we are looking at analytics and conversions. We are trying to track that. So going back to your Aurora, could you help us understand how Aurora brings value to this dynamic situation?
So, as I was saying, so we do three things, right? One is the observability slash telemetry layer, in which we would run these synthetic prompt pipelines across LLMs and using fan out feature we would seed some cluster prompts and then fan out into multiple related prompts, which could run into hundreds or thousands as well in some cases.
Right.
And on that, we do like a mini model and k-means clustering to figure out from this noisy data, which is the observability layer, what is the intent signals around demand, around improvement, and that is the intelligence layer from the observability layer. And then sits the third layer, which is the optimization layer, in which we are trying to improve outcomes for brand, be it in terms of citation share of voice, be it brand mention, be it the sentiment of the brand across different LLMs. And
Mhm.
these recommendations may change from LLM to LLM. And
Mm.
we have some optimizers built in within the platform, like your LLMs.txt file optimizer, wherein we would help LLMs better ingest and index you. We also have JSON schema MD file generator, where all your web pages could have a better optimized schema, again for better ingestion by LLMs. We also analyze server logs to see what kind of real LLM traffic you are getting in terms of a web search bot or a pre-training bot to be able to serve it better. And we also have content optimizers and FAQ optimizers, wherein the brand can overlay their synthetic brand tone and actually create content which is most likely to be cited or ingested by the LLMs. So in that way, we follow like a 360-degree approach from observability to intelligence to improvement and optimization.
Hmm. So that's quite comprehensive, right? So, how about you share an example on how a brand has used this end to end approach, right? This rigorous approach that you just shared with us to improve the visibility across LLMs.
Right. So we work with one of the
Simple
largest
example.
OTAs.
Yeah.
Sorry?
A simple example.
Yeah, so we work with one of the largest OTAs, online travel agent in India, as an example. So they are into flights, hotels. Travel could be pretty complicated, right? And it's also one of the most high intent search category on the LLMs, if you research, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people are doing comparative searches, trip planning, so on and so forth. So when we started this particular with this client, they had a very low baseline citation share of voice and brand mention because of two large things. One was the way their current web pages were set up were more sort of SEO aligned. They didn't have proper LLMs.txt. They didn't have schema for these web pages to ingest LLMs better. When we looked at their server logs, they were getting traffics on specific pages, but those were not optimized. The interlinking was not done well. So one is the technical geo part. So on that we worked with them and fixed it through our optimizers. Second, content is very important. So we looked at how Reddit is being handled by them, how customers are talking about them in various UGC platforms. There were unanswered queries. The refresh rate of content was very low. So we improved the refresh rate of content, whether it's blog, whether it's product level pages. So they have more than 2 million pages on their website on holiday packages, domestic routes, international routes, visa, so on and so forth. So we optimize all of that, a part of it. And then over a few weeks itself, we were able to see more referring traffic, better ingestion by LLMs, and we saw a few basis points improvement in the brand mention and citation share of voice just in a matter of few weeks. But I want to qualify this as well, Richa, that this is not a one-shot game. Like many people we speak to, partners, customers, they feel that, okay, I've done a geo optimization and audit, and now I can sit back and relax. There is a huge degree of volatility here because it's like game theory, right? Your competitors are also doing similar stuff. So unless you're at it every day in, day out, the odds are that you will start to view a lot of volatility in your share of voice and brand mentions if it's not optimized on a almost like a daily basis. So
It's an
that's what we
ongoing
always
optimization cycle. Is that what you're saying? It's an
exactly.
ongoing. Yeah, good, good, good. It was beautifully explained. Right, and you're talking about a continuous feedback loop that your company is building, right, for the brand to adapt as models and competitors are evolving, as the web data is evolving, right? Okay, fantastic. Uh, so how do you see this continuous optimization, approach scaling as more LLMs and AI search platforms emerge?
See, this would add to the complexity. So I was just in the morning in one of the government forums, right? Like India is coming up with its own LLM, so is Saudi Arabia, UAE, Switzerland, so on and so forth. to manage their sovereign level of narratives. So it becomes like a N level problem. Like the user is going to be spoiled for choices of for different LLMs, and as a brand, you would want to care that how your narrative is shaped across each of these LLMs, and there is a certain level of consistency in terms of your canonical fact objects being cited, the way your brand is positioned, and how the sentiment is perceived by the end user. So I think with that variable, it's going to become all the more complicated. But I think the hope here is, Richa, that like ChatGPT, Perplexity, they are sort of signaling a monetization and an ad network which is going to come out. And I think the precursor to that is you have to start sharing a lot of information in a structured format for better targeting. That's how you will bring in the ad dollars, right? So I think once that begins to happen, we would see some level of structured data and analytics layer, base level, being shared by some of these LLMs, and then it'll give a signal, direction level signal to the brand that hey, these are if I solve for these, then at least 60-70% of my coverage is managed. Because there'll be a long tail of sovereign LLMs which people would use only for certain specific matters, but not as a go-to tool for their daily queries, right? So I think people will pick and choose, and brands will also pick and choose their battles that which LLMs I need to most optimize myself for, where I'm getting the maximum demand signals.
That's fantastic. For India, right, where there are these multiple marketplaces, there is WhatsApp group, there is regional news sites, app stores, lot of word of mouth, right, through creators, through communities, and on top of that, right, we have this AI answer engines. So, how are the companies, right, the brands thinking differently?
See, again, and I say this in a lot of my conversation that the typical Western model does not sort of replicate in India, and even big tech companies realize this when they look at a GTM strategy or adoption and scale up in India. Because they like if you see India, it's a very WhatsApp heavy market, right? Unlike the West, where people have moved on to Telegram and more sort of secure platforms or iMessage and so on and so forth. There's a lot of vernacular and regional content which is being consumed in India, and a lot of LLMs are now also looking at ingesting these signals, which is on let's say UGC platforms, inherently on some of these big tech companies like Meta or WhatsApp, so on and so forth, which is in multiple languages. And I think as brands, what you need to do is you got to also own that narrative and explanation in LLMs in all these different languages, not just English. If you have to really be available at scale and shape the narrative. So I think vernacular is one important thing. Second is I think brands would also need to be available on these marketplaces as structured knowledge, not just sort of as listings or listicles.
Exactly.
And I think short format, which is becoming a very addictive format of consumption in India in multimodal formats, right? That is where I think brands would also have to create content in those sort of formats which are best ingested by the users. And LLMs would also start to, with time, give higher weightage to some of those short form content objects. I think that is where in India you have to build the narrative. So the way I see it is, it's not about it's not performance marketing, right? Like typically you can throw more dollars and build your narrative. But here it's about the clearest source of truth, where your content, the way you are talking about your brand across your web pages, the consumers are also talking about in a similar way. The reviews are similar. In WhatsApp communities, people are talking about your brand in a certain way. All of this has to be consistent. If there are discrepancies, the odds are then you would get sort of penalized in your citations.
It's getting fairly technical here, so let's simplify and recap what Kartik is actually talking about. Search didn't disappear. The experience changed. We moved from clicking links to getting answers. Earlier, search engines ranked pages and humans did the thinking. Now, LLMs still retrieve information, but they also combine it, reason over it, and present a single answer. That means brands are no longer just competing to rank, they're competing to be included in the answer. This is why geo isn't just SEO with a new name. What matters now is whether your facts are clear, consistent, and easy for models to understand across the web, not just whether your page is well optimized. The tricky part is that these systems keep changing, models update, sources shift, and what gets cited today may not be cited tomorrow. So, this isn't a one time fix. It's a continuous loop of watching, learning, and adapting. The big takeaway in the age of AI answers, visibility isn't about being the loudest, it's about being the most reliable and consistently understood.